Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our iGyro training session. Today, we've got a different webinar today. We've got HIA members. So 3 members from the HIA are joining us to go through their various topics, from upcoming changes to the Contracts Online, building planning and regulatory updates, NCC compliance updates, and just some other practical advice around industry challenges. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Rebecca Hall from the HIA, and she's going to introduce the rest of the team. But she's the National Building and Development Manager, I believe, and sometimes referred to as the Queen of the HIA, I understand. So welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Becca. I'm your account manager. So if you do have any questions, those of you that are members, just pop me a text or give me a call. I'm going to put our details on the screen now. Is that coming up large?
I'll just put that on. Here we go.
Excellent. Excellent. So today I'm going to introduce you to Morgan Blake and Shane Keating, so integral part of the HIA staff here. As a member, you have access to both Morgan and Shane and all our other specialists too. We've also organised a really special price and offer for the iGyro members, but I'll let Tim talk to you about that. And here's just some stats that I wanted to show you. Can we go to page 3, Tim, the green one?
That's on your machine there. I think you just need to click on that. Yep.
Is that coming up?
There we go.
So that's just some stats I wanted to show you guys of how big we are, how big HIA is, and how many members that we have. So massive association, but I'll let the important people talk now. So first we've got Morgan. So she's going to have a chat to you about the different the importance of using contracts and basically how to use them as well. So thank you, Morgan.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Rebecca. I'll bring Morgan on in just a second. So Rebecca just mentioned about the discount. So HIA have kindly offered a 20% discount for HIA membership for paying iGyro subscribers. So the process for that is just to contact us at support from iGyro, and we'll put you in contact with Rebecca and get that discount organised for you. All righty. Thank you, Morgan.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. Hi, guys. As Tim and Beck have both mentioned, my name is Morgan, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Contracts at HIA, and I also work as a solicitor of part of our subsidiary law firm that we have here, and I'm sitting in Queensland, but work basically nationwide for everyone on their contracts. So today, as was mentioned, I'm here to talk to you about what isn't always the most exciting topic in our industry, but it is one of the most important, and that is the importance of using contracts, and just as importantly, administering those contracts properly. So for the next few minutes, I really wanted to discuss why contracts matter, why HIA contracts are a valuable tool, why administration of contracts is probably more so important as the contract itself, and also how using the correct documentation, specifically with our help throughout the build, can substantially reduce risks. I know that there is an integration with iGyro and our HIA Contracts Online platform. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I'm not technologically literate whatsoever. So Tim will speak about that a little bit, but hopefully I can just give you a broad sort of understanding of our contracts, why the administration matters, and then the key sort of documents that we have that pertain to those contracts and the clauses that can sometimes become a little bit contentious. So first of all, why do contracts matter? So at its core, a building contract is going to do three things for you. First, it's going to set out the agreement between parties. It's going to allocate risk. And then thirdly, it's going to provide a roadmap for dealing with issues when things inevitably are going to change throughout a project. So without a written contract, or with a poorly drafted contract, there's often uncertainty around things like scope of works, the contract price, timeframes, variations, delays, progress, obligations, payment obligations, and then completion requirements as well. So all of the things that are involved with those things, and especially the documentation side of it. So when expectations aren't documented clearly, I often see that that's when misunderstandings occur. And when those misunderstandings occur, that's when disputes are going to arise and follow. So a well-drafted contract is going to provide certainty for both the builder and the client, and it's going to protect the client's interests, but it also is going to protect the builder's business as well. So one of the reasons why HIA contracts specifically are widely used throughout the industry is that they have been developed specifically for residential building. I know that there are other industry bodies and they've got contracts as well. QBCC here have contracts, but ours have really stood the test of time and they have a really good allocation of risk, I think. They're obviously designed to reflect legislative requirements and industry practice while also providing a balanced framework for the builder and the homeowner. And I think importantly, they're not just a collection of terms and conditions, but they form part of a broader contract administration framework that deals with important issues. So things like issuing those variations, issuing extensions of time, progress payments, or progress claims, practical completion. It talks about all defect liability obligations, and then also gives you a little bit of guidance on dispute resolution processes as well. So having those processes really clearly documented helps reduce uncertainty, and it provides you with a structured way to deal with issues when they do arise. And then I think for us, when a dispute occurs, one of the first questions asked is, what does the contract say and what documentation do you have available for us to be able to overcome this? So using an established contract like HIA's contract and all of our other documents that really complement the contract as well, it's going to give you confidence that there is a clear process to follow and the documentation that you are providing is compliant and it has all of the requirements that are within it. So that obviously brings me to what I think is the most important point. So like I said, simply having a signed contract is not going to protect a builder. So a contract is only going to work if it's administered correctly. So I always think of it this way. So having a contract and then failing to follow it is a bit like having a toolbox and then refusing to use any of the tools inside. So like I said, the disputes are always going to occur where the contract actually contains the solution, but the relevant process is not followed and the documentation is not used. So the builder might have been entitled to additional time, they might have been entitled to additional money, but because the correct notice wasn't issued or it wasn't issued on time, those entitlements are going to become a lot harder to enforce under the contract. So that's why the administration is really important. Contract administration for us, I think it's really about documentation. So when we talk about contract administration, what we're talking about is documenting key events throughout the project. So that's another area where we do at HIA provide significant value. So we don't just provide the contract, but we have a range of supporting documents that help builders properly administer their projects from start to finish. And those documents really create a record of what has occurred, when it occurred, how things have been communicated, and the documentation can become critical if questions arise later. So if you take a variation, for example, every builder is going to know that changes happen. Clients are going to change their minds, selections are going to change, site conditions change, issues arise. It's inevitable. And the problem isn't that those variations occur. The problem is going to arise if the correct process isn't followed properly to administer those variations. So when, for example, work might be performed before a variation is approved, disputes can emerge about what was actually requested, what was included, what additional costs should be, and whether the client is going to agree to proceed or not. So a properly executed variation document, I'm using variations as an example, that's going to obviously help eliminate uncertainty by recording change, cost impact, any time implications, and hopefully before the works proceed as well. So that's something that's obviously going to just protect all of the parties. And one thing that I often say to members as well, a lot of the time people will call us at the 11th hour, but we're obviously here all the time. But documentation isn't really about preparing for a dispute, it's about preventing them in the first place. So I find that we provide the least assistance in the best possible way to people who have that documentation. I shouldn't say the least assistance, I should say the least assistance in relation to disputes. Or we find that our members who are in the least amount of disputes are those that have their documentation in order. So most builders, we know that they're genuinely trying to do the right thing, and most clients obviously want their project to be on time, they want it to be successful, and this really just keeps everybody aligned, and it's going to create transparency. It's going to manage expectations, and if a disagreement does arise, there's a clear record of what has occurred if that's been all in place. So that record, it can be invaluable. In relation to us at HIA, so like I said, I work as the Assistant Director of Contracts, but also a lot of advisory work as well, working in the law firm. So one of the key benefits of HIA membership is that you're not simply getting access to our contract documents and all of the forms, but you're also getting access to people who understand the challenges that everyday builders face. So I think a lot of people are, especially new members, they are surprised to learn just how much assistance is available, especially through our contracts and compliance team. So we have a fairly large team that sits across Australia, and we can assist members with everything from relatively straightforward questions such as which contract should I be using, how do I document a variation, what notice do I need to provide in this situation, right through to more complex issues. So navigating difficult client relationships or payment disputes, delays, extensions of time, defect allegations, disputes with homeowners, all of it. And like I said, often, unfortunately, members will often contact us when a problem has already developed. But one of the best, I think, values with HIA is being able to seek our advice before those problems do escalate. And this can often save significant time, money, and stress later. And it's simply about getting guidance on the correct process, and having us here to help, where we really understand both the contractual and the practical realities, which can obviously be an invaluable resource. So with our contracts as well, all of the documents, so all of those key sort of clauses that I've spoken to that often result in disputes, so your things like your progress claims, your extensions of time, variations, all of those things, we do have not only a contract itself, but all of the complementing documentation, so all of those forms to be able to issue alongside every contract to your clients when those milestones are hit. And we have those in every state as well. So on our Contracts Online platform, you will see, and if I talk about upcoming changes to Contracts Online, I don't know from the technical side of things, but I know from our team, basically with all of the contracts, every contract that you are going to have available, we make sure that it's compliant and up to date with the current legislative requirements. We don't try and change our contracts often. We really, if you do see a change, it's normally because there has been a change in the legislation. And then we're obviously always trying to improve our contracts in the background as well. So if there is ever an opportunity where we are changing a contract because of legislative changes, not only will you see those changes in there, but you might see some cosmetic changes to the contract as well that are just trying to make it a little bit neater and tidier and user-friendly. But in every state, every contract is always going to be compliant, and then every supporting documentation in there, so your variation requests, your progress claims, all of those things, they're compliant with each state's legislation as well. So it's all on the Contracts Online platform for you under the relevant states tabs. And then obviously, just to conclude, I just wanted to leave you guys with a few simple messages. So the first is always use an appropriate written contract. Second of all, HIA contracts do provide a practical and proven framework for residential building projects. And I think most importantly, the contract is only as effective as the way it is administered. And I also don't want anyone to have to think that they have to try and manage all of their contractual issues on their own when support is available, both obviously through iGyro and through us as well, if it's a little bit more nitty gritty and about an actual situation or dispute and those types of things. Ultimately, good contract administration isn't about creating more paperwork. We don't want that for anybody, but it's about protecting your business, managing those client expectations, reducing disputes, and I think ensuring that everyone is going to finish their project with clarity and confidence. That's, I think, all that I have to say on our contracts. Tim, hopefully that helps and can flow into the integration that you will talk about. But of course, if there's any questions after, I'm happy to take those.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've got a couple of observations there. I think Rebecca had something to bring into that as well, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to mention for those of you that are a new builder or new to HIA contracts, what we would suggest is you fill out the HIA contract to the best of your ability, then email it to our team and they'll quickly look over, make sure that there's nothing missing, that it's filled out correctly, etc. Because as Morgan said, you know, the administration of the contracts is the most important thing. So you do have that support as well.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful support. And one of the reasons, again, why we like partnering with the HIA as well, like there's the backup support, but really robust contracts. And just to add to what Morgan was saying, like variations as your example there, like our iGyro platform has variations built in. So we use HIA contracts and we augment that with variations so that there's that documentation and everyone knows what the costs are and what to expect. So Gyro can automate a lot of that process. The other thing that you touched on was the integration that iGyro has with HIA. And I'll just quickly share what that means. So I won't take up too much time here. So just in Gyro, this is the web interface for Gyro. We have a HIA integration straight from here. You just connect up your HIA account. But from any job, I'll pull up one that's sort of pre-filled. As you're working through your job, you fill out all of your details as you progress through your job. You've just got this little HIA tab, and all this information is captured within your day-to-day usage of Gyro, like your client details, your client addresses, contract amounts, prime costs, provisional sums. We also touched on before on the progress payment schedules. And all these things get entered into the contracts online manually most of the time, but we can just, with a simple click, push that through to HIA with our integration. So things that are a part of a contract with a client, like these provisional sums, would automatically get pulled into the HIA contract. So when we talk about the HIA integration, that's what we're referring to, is just a really quick way to push information in that you already have to save that double entry. So I think there's some new changes to Contract Online happening, and I've been talking with the contracts tech team or the HIA tech team. So within the coming months, I think there's some changes there that'll make that even better as well. All right, thanks guys. What we got next, Rebecca? Is Shane the next person to bring up here?
Yep, Shane Keating, he's our building technical guru.
Okay. Thank you,
Good
Shane.
afternoon.
You're on.
Right to go, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Rebecca and Morgan. So, yes, as I mentioned, I'm Executive Director of Building Policy. I look after our technical services team here at the HIA. I'm going to be talking to you today primarily about the move to NCC 2025 and what that means for members. HIA have been deeply involved in the process, and we also produce a number of information, materials and resources that assist people to understand and work their way through what the implications are. As I mentioned, NCC 2025, it was published in 2026, but it's still called NCC 2025. It has some significant changes in it, both for houses and apartments, but in particular for commercial buildings. It's not NCC 2022, doesn't have the same impact that the industry would have felt associated with the energy efficiency changes for residential, livable housing, those sorts of issues. But there are some important updates to things like condensation management, which I'll talk you through in a moment. Just in terms of adoption around the country, depending on where you are, you'll have a very different experience of NCC 2025. Victoria were the first to adopt the changes on 1 May 2026 with no transition. Other states like Western Australia, for example, provided the dual use of either the existing code or NCC 2025 up until 1 May 2027. Similarly for the ACT. For the most of the rest of the country, they're adopting on 1 May 2027. So there's a period of grace in which industry can get familiar with what those changes are before actually having to apply them on site. And I'd certainly encourage you, if you're in one of those states, to get familiar with what the code requires. And today's a part of that, I suppose. For the Northern Territory, they've chosen not to adopt, so it's status quo. When it comes to the code itself, there were so many changes which were forecast and discussed at length through the development process. It's important just to recap on where all of those changes got to. So I'll take you through now just for the implications for housing. In particular, condensation management. There were 4 drafts of the NCC released for comment. There were 1,200 pages within it with track changes. There were 4 major analyses supporting it, and there was only 8 weeks to get across all of that detail. So if today, hopefully, we can demystify some of those changes to you. Where the changes for condensation management got to for cold climates were that there are mandatory obligations for drained and ventilated cavities in those climate zones 6 through 8. There's also been some inclusions as well as some small roof exemptions, some other improvements to the way those clauses are structured. They have been wound back slightly from where they started. The changes this year and for the next 3 years are really quite governance heavy. Some of those changes, because they do relate to the way you apply the code, have a 1-year transition associated with them. So until a year after adoption, and again, you'll recall that map, depending on where you are, that timeline will change. Some of those obligations won't actually be enforced. Expert judgment, I won't be talking a lot about those governance changes today, but from the perspective of using expert judgment, there is a push towards restricting its use, particularly for things like performance solutions for fire and structure. So there's mandatory new obligations to use quantified ways of assessing solutions in those spaces. Lots of reference document changes. I'll talk you through a list of those, but the key ones there: swimming pools, smoke alarms, cladding, a new cladding option for expanded insulation finish systems, with some caveats around its use, and wind loads for housing has also been updated. And there's a new alternative reference document process, which would allow you to use a document that's not referenced in the code when it's been deemed appropriate by the ABCB. So that's a relaxation that provides potentially some more options. For apartments, much the same for condensation. The real change here and the real emphasis on uptick in stringency is around waterproofing and water shedding. And that's for all commercial building classes, but in particular for this group, I think you should be aware that Class 2 concrete balconies are subject to some significant changes. Energy efficiency, commercial energy efficiency stringency is also very ambitious this time around. However, Class 2 common areas have been removed from the need to apply those obligations. So there is a slight relaxation in that space. Some further options have been included around sprinklering of car parks to address the risks associated with modern vehicles. And there's some new options for fire protected steel as well. So just in summary, I'll take you through briefly with some light and colour around these changes, but mainly around external waterproofing, some additional options for car park fire safety. The stringency for commercial buildings is near net zero now in terms of its ambition, and some fire protected steel options similar to the mass timber buildings. So for external water management, if you're familiar with Part F of the code, if you work in multi-residential or Class 2 buildings, this is where the majority of the changes lie for this section. The performance requirements have been consolidated back to one requirement from what were previously 3 or 4. There are some new obligations in there to address things like wind-driven rain against buildings as well. So when you're doing performance solutions, certainly a more complex space to work in now than it was previously. For balconies of Class 2 buildings, the mandatory requirements to fall to stormwater drainage within those balconies under 3500 Part 3, that's not a new obligation, but where you do need to install those drainage options that don't rely on a gutter, there are some fairly prescriptive provisions to comply with there. As part of draining from balconies, ensuring that the water doesn't impact other areas inadvertently, there's minimum falls now required. There's minimum step downs from the internal surface of the building. There's minimum hob perimeter heights. And there's also a need to connect your membrane directly to your structural substrate. So not only do falls need to be included in the structural substrate, the membrane needs to be attached to that as well. So if you're looking to achieve a finish that doesn't rely on the tile being directly fixed to the membrane, if you want to achieve a level finish, for example, you'll have to rely on something like a podium system in the future. Basement car parks are now subject to some more significant provisions, where in the past they were potentially excluded through the code and a limitation within it. There's no solutions in the code for that, though. They'll now be subject to performance solutions predominantly. These condensation management changes, they also affect both volume 1, so commercial buildings or residential class 2 or 3 buildings, class 9 buildings, but also class 1 buildings. So I mentioned earlier, the requirements for control layers have been expanded. There's new permeance requirements. There's a need for a drained and ventilated cavity, or there's an option for a drained and ventilated cavity in other areas and other climate zones as well, but they are mandatory in climate zones 6 through 8, so those colder areas. Some small improvements and exemptions for small roofs or the types of walling systems that can't accommodate that. But there have been some structural changes as well that just help interpret the obligations around roofs, splitting, for instance, raked and cathedral ceilings, being clear about the minimum cavity dimensions, been slightly reduced as well. And the ventilation opening areas, there's a slight change to the method there that will change the amount of ventilation that's required in those circumstances. Won't talk in a lot of detail about the commercial energy efficiency changes. If you're interested in those, HIA website has some information on them. Similarly, with changes to reference documents, we have a resource that outlines what those reference documents are that have changed. But broadly, they're things like the 1170 series for both wind actions and earthquake actions. The 3500 plumbing and draining series has been updated and referenced in the code. The subservient wind loads for housing 4055 has been updated, consistent with the parent standard. The structural standards 1684 part 2, 3 and 4 have been updated. Some minor amendments there, nothing too significant to report here. Swimming pool safety barriers has been subject to a fairly significant update, so that would be one to check out if you're working in that space in particular. One thing just to make note of, I haven't covered any state and territory variations today, but states and territories have varied the code. Some of those are available. If you're in Victoria, they're available and you can encounter those, both a summary on the HIA website for members, or for others, you'll need to go to the BPC to find out what they are. I will draw your attention to the fact that lead and plumbing requirements have been further pushed out to 2028 for the rest of the country, whereas Victoria, consistent with the way they adopted code for NCC 2025, have brought those forward. So that's a live obligation today. You need to be complying with lead-free plumbing products in installations in Victoria today. Just a final note on our resources and the way we support members. We have a dedicated NCC 2025 hub that covers things like adoption dates, all of the topics that I've covered here today in intricate detail, much more than I can cover in 10 minutes or so. But if you'd want to explore those a little bit more, there's a QR code on your screen there, and I'm sure these slides will be made available after the event. So happy to take any questions on anything I've covered. A whirlwind tour of NCC 2025.
That's perfect. That certainly was a whirlwind tour. Thanks for that. But yes, we'll make this recording available to everyone after the fact as well, and hopefully they can reach out for some questions. But if there's any questions now, you can raise your hand and we can allow the panel to answer those. So you're largely question-free this afternoon. You covered it well, guys. All right. So yeah, no, thanks for joining us, and the 20% discount as well. So for those that are Gyro subscribers, we can reach out and make that happen too. Yeah, all this has been very valuable information and really appreciate it. Thanks for joining HIA.
Thank you.
Pleasure. See you guys.
Thanks.
See you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.